What if I told you that the Oscar Piastri crash we all saw wasn't actually pilot error? What if it was actually the car itself that betrayed him at the worst possible moment? Because now the Piastri engineer has revealed a truth that is generating a real earthquake within the team, an explanation that points directly to the heart of the McLaren car and to a technical management that could have put the driver in a situation impossible to control. It all started in Albert Park at the Australian Grand Prix, the stage where McLaren arrived as one of the great favorites after its spectacular resurgence in Formula One and with a duo of drivers who seemed ready to fight for everything: Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. But in a matter of seconds before the race even began, everything turned into unexpected chaos when Piastri's car lost control and ended up against the wall, a crash that left the driver out even before taking the start in front of his audience. At that moment, many thought it was simply one of those typical errors with cold tires on the return to the grid, something that happens more times than we imagine in Formula One. However, what seemed like a simple incident began to transform into something much more serious when technical explanations began to appear from McLaren's own garage that did not fit with the initial version. The car data revealed something unexpected, a sudden delivery of power that the driver himself was not anticipating at that critical moment of the lap. And that is where the revelation that is shaking the team appears. Because according to Piastri's engineer, the car released extra electrical power just when the car was in the middle of the low grip phase, a situation that in Formula One can turn a perfectly controllable car into a machine that is impossible to master. That revelation opens up a disturbing question that is currently generating real drama within McLaren. If the car system worked exactly as designed, then what really caused the accident? Was it a problem with the new technical regulations, a too aggressive calibration of the hybrid system, or an internal error of the team itself that now no one wants to publicly acknowledge? Because if the latter is true, the Australian incident could be much more than a simple accident. It could be the sign that McLaren is operating at the technical limit in an extremely dangerous way. And the most surprising thing is that the more the data from that moment is analyzed, the more doubts appear about what really happened inside Piastri's car in those seconds before the impact. Today we are going to analyze everything that has been revealed, what exactly his engineer said, why this explanation has generated tension within the team, and how this incident could uncover one of the most delicate problems of the new McLaren car. Because what started as a simple accident before the race could end up becoming one of the biggest technical dramas that the team has experienced in recent years. The Australian Grand Prix always has something special in Formula One. It is the first big test of the year for many teams, the moment when it is finally discovered if all the winter work has really worked or if, on the contrary, there are hidden problems that no one has seen yet. And on this occasion the pressure on McLaren was enormous, because they arrived at Albert Park as one of the strongest teams in the championship after having staged one of the greatest recent recoveries in the category. The British team had returned to the top with an extremely ambitious technical project and with a lineup of drivers that generated excitement both inside and outside the garage: Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. The previous season had shown that McLaren was not only capable of competing against the traditional giants, but also of beating them in certain circumstances, and that is why the start of this new championship was surrounded by very high expectations. The team led by Andrea Stella had worked for months on the evolution of its car, developing a car that sought to improve practically all aspects of the previous model with the clear intention of fighting for the championship again. In fact, the car's own technical project had been described internally as an aggressive evolution of the previous car, meaning that many areas of the car had been redesigned to push the limits of performance since the start of the season. That context explains why the atmosphere in Melbourne was so optimistic for McLaren. Pre-season analysis suggested that the British team could be among the fastest on the grid, and they also had two drivers who had already demonstrated an extremely competitive level. Norris had consolidated his position as one of the most consistent drivers in the championship, while Piastri continued to confirm that he was one of the greatest promises of modern Formula One. His growth within the team had been constant, and many expected that this season would be the moment in which the Australian definitively made the leap towards fighting for victories on a regular basis. Everything seemed to be lining up perfectly for a strong start to the championship, and there was also an emotional factor that made this weekend even more special for Piastri. He was competing in his home race in front of his home crowd at the Albert Park circuit. These types of situations usually generate extra motivation for pilots, but they can also add additional pressure that not everyone manages to manage in the same way. Meanwhile, Piastri himself also offered his first impressions of what happened. The Australian driver explained that the car reacted in a way that he was not anticipating at that point in the lap. It was not a simple mistake when stepping on the accelerator too soon, but rather a loss of traction that came abruptly when the car was still in a very delicate grip phase. That description matched perfectly what engineers were seeing in the car's data. The driver felt an unexpected response from the car at the exact moment in which the electrical system released that extra power. And that is precisely where the real drama within McLaren begins. Because once that information began to circulate within the paddock, the discussion stopped focusing solely on the accident in Australia and began to focus on a much deeper question. If the car is capable of delivering such aggressive power at such a critical moment, could something similar happen again in other races? This possibility began to generate concern within the team, because it means that the behavior of the car could be at an extremely sensitive calibration point. In Formula One, when a car becomes unpredictable in its power delivery, even the best drivers can find themselves trapped in situations that are impossible to control. Suddenly, what seemed like a simple abandonment before the race began to reveal a much more uncomfortable reality for McLaren. The team that arrived as one of the favorites for the championship now had to face the possibility that its car was operating on the verge of behavior that was extremely difficult to manage. And when that idea began to be discussed among engineers, drivers, and paddock analysts, Piastri's accident stopped being just an isolated incident and became the first sign of a technical problem that could affect the team for the entire season. The impact of Oscar Piastri's accident did not end when the car was removed from the track at Albert Park. In fact, the real problem began later, when the technical explanation began to circulate within the paddock and analysts began to understand what could really have happened in the McLaren car. Because if the data indicated that the car had released an unexpected amount of electrical power just as the driver was exiting the corner on cold tires, then the question many began to ask was inevitable. To what extent could the car's design itself be pushing the limits in a dangerous way? And that doubt began to quickly establish itself both within the team and outside of it. McLaren had built its new technical project with an extremely aggressive philosophy. The car had been developed as a profound evolution of the previous car, with the intention of improving virtually every area of performance and staying in contention for championships after its recent resurgence. That mentality of pushing the limits is completely normal in Formula One, where each team tries to find small technical advantages that can make the difference against their rivals. But when a car begins to show unpredictable behavior in critical situations, that same technical aggressiveness can become a serious problem. What began to be discussed within the paddock was whether the Australian incident could simply be the first warning of something deeper. Modern Formula One hybrid systems are incredibly complex, and the way electrical power is delivered depends on extremely sophisticated power maps programmed by engineers. These maps determine when and how the car releases the energy stored in the electrical system, and any variation in that calibration can radically change the way the car responds to the accelerator. If that power delivery occurs at an unexpected time, especially when the car still has little grip, the result can be exactly what was seen with Piastri: a sudden loss of traction that not even a Formula One driver can correct in time. The problem is that now McLaren can no longer ignore what happened. Piastri's accident has made it clear that there is a situation that must be analyzed very carefully before the next races. Because if the hybrid system can release power at a time when the pilot does not expect it, the risk of something similar happening again is always present. And in a championship where every point can decide the title, even a single retirement caused by unexpected car behavior can have enormous consequences. For Oscar Piastri, the blow was especially hard, not only for abandoning before the race started, but for doing so in his own home Grand Prix, in front of a fan who expected to see him fight for the leading positions. But at the same time, this incident has also made something clear. In modern Formula One, even the most competitive teams can encounter extremely delicate technical situations when they push their cars to the limits of performance. And McLaren is precisely one of those teams that has decided to take its project to the highest possible level to stay in the fight for the championships. The big question now is whether what happened in Australia was simply a very specific circumstance caused by cold tires, low grip, and unfortunate power delivery, or if it is actually a sign that the car is operating within an extremely narrow window of behavior. If it's the former, it will probably go down as one of those strange incidents that happen from time to time in Formula One. But if it's the latter, then McLaren will have to carefully review the way it is managing its car's power deployment to prevent something like this from happening again in the future. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.